What if your pain, your struggles, your failures, your disappointments were not obstacles, but stepping stones? What if the suffering you carry could become the very foundation of your strength? This is what Friedrich Nietzsche believed, and perhaps today, that idea is exactly what you need to hear. Nietzsche didn't see pain as something to be avoided. He saw it as something to be transformed. He believed that life's hardships are not only inevitable, but essential. To live is to suffer. He wrote, "To survive is to find some meaning in the suffering. And from that meaning, we can build something greater, something more powerful than comfort, purpose." At the heart of Nietzsche's philosophy is the idea of becoming who you truly are, not what others expect, not what society tells you, but the most authentic, powerful, fearless version of yourself. That journey isn't easy. It demands that you shed illusions, abandon comfort, and walk alone for long stretches of time. But in doing so, you grow into your potential not through perfection, but through persistence. He spoke of a concept known as the eternal return. Imagine this, that every moment in your life, every decision, every triumph, and every failure will repeat forever. Would you live differently? Would you take risks? Would you waste less time? For Nietzsche, this wasn't just a thought experiment, it was a test of how affirming your life really is. Because if you can live in such a way that you'd be willing to live the same life over and over again, then you're truly living. To get there, you need a why. Nietzsche famously said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow." Your why is what gives pain a purpose. When you know what you're fighting for, what you believe in, what you're willing to build no matter the odds, the pain doesn't vanish, but it becomes fuel. And with that fuel, you can do more than survive. You can rise. But Nietzsche also warned us about the danger of standing still, of stagnating into a version of ourselves that's safe, obedient, predictable. He challenged us to go beyond what we've been told, beyond the limits we inherited, to step into chaos, not to be lost in it, but to give it form. That's the path of self-overcoming, becoming stronger than your former self again and again and again. This is where Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch, the overman, comes in. He's not talking about someone better than others. He's talking about someone better than their past self, someone who breaks free from the herd, who doesn't wait for permission to act, who creates their own values, their own purpose, and lives with fierce intention. That kind of person is not born, they are forged. To do this, you must stop following the path others laid out for you. Nietzsche's entire philosophy is a call to reject conformity and create your own values. You have to abandon the comfort of borrowed beliefs and start asking, what do I believe in? What do I live for? What am I willing to endure to build something meaningful? This is the art of transforming pain into power. Life will hurt. People will disappoint you. Dreams will break. But Nietzsche believed you can turn that suffering into a kind of alchemy. You can take all the darkness you've endured and use it to forge something bright, resilient, and unshakable inside you. He criticized morality rooted in weakness, one that encouraged self-denial, passivity, and guilt. Instead, he believed in a life that embraces strength, vitality, and will, not cruelty, not arrogance, but strength of spirit, the kind of strength that stands when it would be easier to fall. This strength isn't loud, it's quiet, it's built in the moments no one sees, when you choose to keep going, when you wake up early to work on yourself, when you speak your truth even when your voice shakes, when you say no to what no longer serves you. That is power, and it's earned. Nietzsche believed that the path to freedom lies in destroying illusions. We're often chained by false beliefs about who we are, what we're capable of, what we deserve. These beliefs aren't truths, they're cages. And only by breaking them can you begin to live with freedom, with intention, with clarity. He also taught that solitude is not something to fear, it's something to embrace. To truly grow, you'll have to spend time alone, time in silence, time with your thoughts, not to isolate, but to listen. They hear the voice that's been drowned out by noise, the voice that tells you who you are. That's where courage is born. Real courage isn't about fearlessness, it's about choosing truth, even when it's uncomfortable. It's about facing what you've avoided, admitting what's broken, owning your choices, and then doing the hard thing anyway. Courage is living authentically, even when it costs you everything. Fake. Nietzsche knew the value of creativity. He believed art, philosophy, music, these were expressions of life's deepest truths. When you create, you're not just producing something, you're becoming something. You're giving shape to the chaos inside you, and in doing so, you're healing. He believed life could be a work of art and that we are the artists. But art is not created without struggle. It's born through tension, conflict, passion, and persistence. And so is the best version of you. To live this way is to live deliberately. It is to stop drifting and start building, to take ownership of your energy, your attention, your time, to stop waiting for the world to give you a reason and become the reason yourself. Nietzsche's words are not easy. His path is not comforting, but it is empowering. It asks you to step into the fire and come out transformed, not perfect, not finished, but real, alive, awake. And maybe that's what life is for. Not to be easy, not to be safe, but to be lived with intensity, with purpose, and with the kind of courage that makes you proud to live the same life twice, forever. So stop waiting, stop holding back, become who you are, and don't just survive, overcome. You were not made to fit in, you were made to rise. And yet, even with all this, Nietzsche was not offering easy answers. He wasn't handing out steps for happiness or shortcuts to success. His philosophy was a challenge, of brutal, honest confrontation with the reality of life, a mirror held up to your soul, asking, are you willing to do the hard work of becoming who you are meant to be? Are you willing to suffer, to sacrifice, to push beyond every weakness, doubt, and fear? For Nietzsche, it wasn't about being better than others. It was about being better than yesterday's version of yourself, and not just once, but endlessly, repeatedly, through discipline, reflection, and sheer willpower. He saw life as a continual act of transformation. You fall, you get up, you break, you rebuild. You get lost, and then, in the very act of searching, you find something new, not out in the world, but within. He called this process self-overcoming, the will to climb above who you are today, not to seek perfection, but to chase potential. He believed that every human being contains within them a seed of greatness, not a destiny, but a possibility, and it's through pain, failure, solitude, and effort that we water that seed. This wasn't just philosophy for books. It was a call to arms. Nietzsche believed that we could become strong not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually, strong enough to carry the weight of life, strong enough to find joy not despite the pain but through it. He wasn't telling us to chase comfort. He was telling us to chase fire, to walk into it, to burn away the false layers and find what's real, because once you've walked through the fire and survived, you no longer fear it. You become it. You become a source of light, of warmth, of power. And from that place, you begin to live differently. You begin to choose your own path, not the one society expects, not the one your past tried to write for you, but the one your soul insists upon. You stop following and you start creating. Nietzsche believed in the power of will, the power not as domination over others, but as mastery over oneself. That strength isn't shown in how loud you speak or how much control you have over people, but in how well you command your own mind, your own reactions, your own life. He wanted us to stop waiting for meaning to fall from the sky, to stop relying on tradition, religion, or authority to tell us who we are. He wanted us to create our own meaning, to build values that were earned through lived experience, to become the author of our own story. And in a world that constantly tries to define us through labels, algorithms, expectations, that message has never been more relevant. Nietzsche reminds us that no one gets to decide your worth but you, that your identity is not static, that you have the power, the right, and the responsibility to evolve. He also reminds us that to live fully is to embrace contradictions, strength and vulnerability, confidence and doubt, success and failure. You don't have to be perfect to be powerful. You just have to be honest. Honest with yourself, honest about what you want, honest about what you're willing to give to. Get there. This kind of life isn't easy, but nothing extraordinary ever is. Nietzsche's philosophy teaches us that the greatest battles we will ever face are not external. They are not out there in the world, but deep within us. The conflict between who we are and who we are meant to become is a lifelong tension, one that demands courage, persistence, and brutal honesty. He didn't write for the faint of heart. He wrote for those brave enough to face their own shadow and still choose to move forward. To Nietzsche, the shadow isn't a flaw, it's a part of you. Your anger, your envy, your shame, your weakness, these aren't signs of failure. They are human, but they become dangerous only when ignored or denied. That's why Nietzsche insisted that we confront them, that we don't hide from our darkness, but integrate it. Only by knowing our full self, light and shadow, can we ever hope to become whole. This is not about fixing yourself. It's about forging yourself. It's not about erasing your past, but using it as fuel. Your scars are not symbols of defeat there. Proof that you've lived, that you've fought, that you've healed, and that you're still here. Nietzsche believed that in suffering, in enduring, in struggling forward, we become something new, something more. He once said, "What does not kill me makes me stronger." It's a phrase repeated so often that it risks losing its depth. But in Nietzsche's words, it wasn't cliché. It was a call to reclaim your power. Every challenge you face, every time you get knocked down and refuse to stay there, you are building strength. Quietly, relentlessly, invisibly, until one day, you realize you've become someone who bends but doesn't break. There is a sacredness to struggle. Where we stop asking why me and start asking what now. Nietzsche believed in creating meaning even where none exists. In a world without clear answers, he argued, we are the meaning makers. We are not passive recipients of truth. We are its creators. And through that act of creation, through the assertion of will, we bring purpose into existence. This might sound like a heavy burden, and it is, but it's also liberation. Because if no one can give you meaning, it means no one can take it away. That's why Nietzsche taught that you must live as an artist, not necessarily one who paints or writes or sings, but one who creates. With their choices, every act, every risk, every change, every failure, they are brushstrokes on the canvas of your life. And while you may not control everything that happens to you, you do control what you make of it. He believed we must live as though we are sculpting our character, our destiny, moment by moment, not just reacting to the world, but shaping ourselves in response to it. And in doing so, we turn suffering into wisdom, pain into growth, and chaos into beauty. But to walk this path is to walk alone, at least for a time. Nietzsche knew the loneliness that comes with independence, the silence that follows when you no longer follow the crowd, the emptiness that surfaces when you strip away all the noise and finally ask, who am I without all this? But he also knew that in that silence, something else appears, clarity, intuition, a voice that whispers not what others want, but what you need. That voice is your guide. Follow it, even when it leads you through fear, especially then. Nietzsche never promised that greatness would be easy, but he did promise that it would be worth it. To live a life that you chose, a life that expresses your values, your voice, your vision, that is a rare and revolutionary act. It's not something you inherit, it's something you fight for. And in that fight, Nietzsche reminded us to avoid the trap of bitterness, to not let struggle harden your heart, but sharpen your spirit. He saw strength not as domination, but as resilience, the ability to bend, adapt, and keep moving forward. True strength, in Nietzsche's eyes, is to remain soft when the world tries to make you hard, to remain honest when lies would be easier, to remain full of fire when it would be easier to go cold. He urged us to say yes to life, not just when it's beautiful, but when it's ugly, not just when it's easy, but when it's unbearable. Because in that yes, in that radical acceptance of all things the light and the dark, you discover something profound. That life, in all its complexity, is still worth living, still worth fighting for, still worth creating from. This is what Nietzsche called amor fati, the love of one's fate, not just tolerance of your circumstances, but the embrace of them, loving everything that has happened to you, not because it's perfect, but because it's yours, and because without it, you wouldn't be the person you are becoming. Imagine living like that. Imagine waking up and saying, I accept it all, I welcome it all, I will use it all. That is power, that is freedom, that is what it means to live with depth. Nietzsche's words are difficult because they demand responsibility. They don't allow you to stay comfortable. They ask you to rise, not once, but every day, every hour, to choose life again and again, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Because you were not made to be ordinary. You were not born to coast, to please, to stay small. You were made to expand, to rise, to exceed even your own expectations. Not for applause, not for validation, but for the quiet joy of becoming more than you were, becoming the person only you can be. And so the question remains, will you? Will you stop waiting? Will you stop apologizing? Will you stop running from your pain, your past, your truth? Will you take everything life has given you, the love, the loss, the beauty, the brutality, and turn it into something magnificent? Will you create meaning where there is none? Will you write your own code, forge your own path, shape your own soul? If the answer is yes, then you have already begun. You are already walking the path Nietzsche carved, the path of self-overcoming, the path of the overman, The path of power not over others, but over yourself. And it is on that path that you will discover what Nietzsche wanted all of us to see. That the meaning of life is not given, it is created. By you. And in creating it, you do not escape suffering. You transcend it. Not by denying your humanity, but by fully stepping into it. And in that full embrace of who you are and who you are becoming, you will no longer ask, what is the purpose of life? Because you will be living it. Right now. True growth, Nietzsche believed, demands the abandonment of comfort and the embrace of discomfort. It is in discomfort that we uncover resilience, in struggle that we discover meaning, and in the silence of solitude that our truest thoughts begin. To speak, life, to Nietzsche, wasn't meant to be pleasant, it was meant to be transformative. Every challenge, every burden, every sorrow could be turned into fuel for the fire of becoming. He reminded us that to truly live is not to avoid suffering, but to master it. And this mastery does not come from suppression, it comes from awareness. From stepping back, looking our fear in the eye, and choosing to act anyway. It is the decision to lean in when everything in you wants to retreat, to climb, even when your legs tremble. Nietzsche called us to see life as a great artwork in progress, not a product of chaos, but of creation, and as the artists of our lives. We're not bound by the past, we're inspired by it. Even our deepest pain can become the texture of something noble. Even the darkest night, he believed, contains within it the seed of dawn. There is something revolutionary in this vision. In a world where we are constantly taught to chase happiness, Nietzsche dared to chase meaning. Where others fled from discomfort, he walked into it and built his philosophy there, brick by brick. For him, it wasn't about avoiding the storm, it was about becoming the storm's master. And yet, he never claimed this path was easy. In fact, he insisted it wouldn't be. The higher the mountain, the lonelier the climb, the greater the transformation, the more intense the fire. But it is in this intensity that we find the edge of who we were and the beginning of who we could become. Nietzsche believed the human soul was not fixed, but fluid. We are not born complete, we are born capable. Capable of rising, of evolving, of creating something newer, stronger, more beautiful with each step. But only if we are brave enough to face what is within us and shape it with fierce intention. The Übermensch was not a fantasy of superiority, it was a metaphor for transcendence, for the version of you that's waiting on the other side of fear, that lives beyond the walls of doubt, that emerges when you have broken through the ceiling of who you thought you were. This transformation doesn't require approval, it doesn't ask permission, it doesn't wait for timing to be perfect. It begins now, in the smallest choices you make, to speak when you'd rather stay silent, to continue when quitting seems easier, to believe in yourself when no one else does. In this way, Nietzsche's legacy is not just intellectual, it's deeply personal. His ideas are not relics for scholars, but blueprints for warriors of the mind and heart. And you are one of them. Every time you wake up and try again, every time you choose to grow instead of shrink, every time you refuse to be defeated by circumstance, you honor his spirit, because life, in Nietzsche's world, is not a question to be answered, but a riddle to be lived. And in living it fully, boldly, authentically, we become the very source of the meaning we seek, not in finding truth, but in creating it, not in discovering purpose, but in embodying it. You were not born to follow, you were born to lead yourself. Every day, life gives you the opportunity to recreate yourself, not because you were broken, but because you are becoming. In Nietzsche's eyes, every struggle, every failure, every ounce of suffering is an invitation to step deeper into the process of self-overcoming. This is not a what-I'm acted, as a rhythm, a cycle of birth, death, and rebirth within the self. You must be willing to let parts of yourself die, the laziness, the fear, the need for approval, the comfort that poisons your potential. These things must fall away like old skin if you are to grow into the person who can carry the life you desire. Nietzsche didn't want you to suppress your chaos. He wanted you to shape it, to organize your fire, to build your values not on imitation, but on authenticity. He knew how hard this was, that the world often rewards obedience, not originality, but Nietzsche believed that each of us, deep inside, possesses a hidden greatness, not a perfection, but a raw, unfiltered energy that when directed with intention can change everything. You might not feel powerful right now. You might feel lost, discouraged, tired, but power, real power, doesn't come from never feeling weak. It comes from refusing to stay weak. It comes from walking through the ruins of what once broke you and building something sacred in its place. That's what Nietzsche did. That's what he calls us to do. He saw beauty in the process, not the polished end, but the middle, the messy, confusing, painful middle where growth actually happens. It's there, in the uncertain moments, in the late night thoughts, in the lonely walks, that we meet the real self. And if we're honest, and if we're brave, we don't run from it. We welcome it. To Nietzsche, you are not merely a product of your circumstances. You are a sculptor, a warrior, a creator. You are not defined by the roles you were given, but by the roles you choose to play. You are not who the world says you are. You are who you decide to become. And this becoming requires vision. He asked us, can you see yourself in the future stronger, wiser, freer? Can you picture the version of you who no longer fears failure, who acts with clarity, who lives with purpose? That version is not a fantasy. It is a direction, a guidepost, something you move toward, not in grand gestures, but in daily decisions. The gym, the book, the journal, the hard conversation, the extra hour of focus, the refusal to settle. These are the sacred rituals of transformation. They are the footsteps that lead you to your ideal. And when you stumble and you get up, not because someone is watching, but because the work is not finished. Nietzsche would say, that pain you feel, that's your teacher. That emptiness, that space waiting to be filled by meaning, that struggle, that's the fire that forges your strength. Everything you experience, every failure, every heartbreak, every unanswered question is part of the furnace that shapes your destiny. And through it all, you begin to realize you are not chasing success. You are chasing depth, alignment, realness. You are not running toward applause. You are walking into truth, into power, into yourself. You begin to live not for comfort, but for clarity, not for perfection, but for authenticity, not for what's easy, but for what's right. And in that, you begin to take something rare, freedom, not the freedom from struggle, but the freedom to transform through it. This is the alchemy of self-overcoming, the sacred fire of becoming who you were meant to be, not because it's written in the stars, but because you wrote it into your bones, because you chose it, because you earned it. So the next time life knocks you down, remember this: you are not broken. You are becoming. The process is working. You are in motion. You are alive. And as Nietzsche would remind you, he who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow. Find your why. Let it burn. Let it guide you. Let it shape you. And then become the kind of person who no longer needs a map, because you are the path.